You're listening to the Two Tongues Podcast. And now your hosts, Kyle and Chris.
Welcome to the Two Tongues Podcast.
Buongiorno, mi scusi.
We're about to talk about some shit. Some things.
You know it.
Yeah, man.
Some shit and some things.
Some shit and some things.
That's what we're here to do.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Hit the like button, subscribe, all that stuff. Do the things.
Yeah.
Please and thank you.
I wonder how Ross is doing from Scotland.
Yeah, I was just actually thinking about messaging him yesterday. I'll probably do that sometime later this week.
Yeah, popped in my head a few times.
Shoot him a message on WhatsApp. He's like the only reason I have WhatsApp.
He's the only reason I have WhatsApp.
Yes, indeed.
So what's new with you, man?
So not, same shit, different day. It's a beautiful day. So I was outside a little bit. That's good.
Yeah.
Always fun. One thing that's new with me, just talk about being an old man.
Okay.
They don't call me base fat Chad for no reason. I eat a lot throughout my life. I've been eating, but man, so we went out to dinner, like as a late birthday celebration.
We did. Yeah, you and I, yeah.
Me, you and your wife. And dude, when I eat too much now, I feel like shit.
For how long?
Like a few hours, But yeah, when we went out to dinner that night, I felt like I was having a heart attack or something.
Oh, man. No.
Just like all kinds of not congestion, like indigestion,
Oh, yeah. You all
man,
sweaty?
I don't know that I was sweaty, but man. And then I ate a little bit too much for lunch today too. And I just was not feeling good.
Yeah.
It's crazy. That kind of stuff never used to happen.
Yeah.
Also, going off keto really hurts. I feel like keto, aside from just losing weight, it's just like a good diet for my body chemistry. It really works for me.
Yep.
I don't get heartburn. I feel way better when I'm doing keto.
Yeah. I feel the same. The same.
It gets boring though, and the beer.
Yeah.
The fucking beer.
So today we were standing outside in the driveway and the kids were playing with the neighbor kids, and Linda comes out with this cold Corona in her hands, and I just looked at her, and it was like,
you bitch.
No, it was like I immediately turned to the door to go get me one without even realizing how powerful that not only just
it's Pavlovian.
It's Pavlovian, man.
Yeah. That bell ring, your mouth starts to water.
It was hot outside. I knew that beer was cold.
Yeah.
And it was a Corona Premier, so it's like a low calorie, low carb beer. There's all kinds of ways of excusing drinking that thing.
Absolutely.
And I went inside and I thought about it for a second. I just grabbed a bottle of water.
Yeah.
Went outside like a champion.
Stay hydrated.
Conquered my temptations.
Slaying the dragon.
Slaying that dragon.
Speaking of slaying the dragon, did you watch your boy Jordan Peterson on Rogan?
I haven't finished it, but I
haven't watched any of it. Really.
I started watching it last night.
I saw him maybe some very small clips. Rogan was being kind of cringe.
Oh,
he was on the verge of tears talking about muscle cars. He was basically about to cry.
Wow.
Yeah.
I missed that part. I can't wait to listen to that.
He was, going off about psychedelics and whatnot.
I'd like to hear that for sure. The part I remember in the beginning was Joe commenting about his crazy suit.
Yeah.
And Jordan was talking about the Italian guy that makes the suits.
Yeah.
That he makes them and sends them to him. It doesn't even sound like Jordan is ordering them. It sounds like he's getting them as a gift from this guy.
Yeah, yeah. They're all based on his rules.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this one was they look like Eastern Orthodox icons all over his shirt with a black lapel, and Joe was asking him about it, and he was like, "Yeah, this guy," and he said his name, and I can't remember. He's like, "This, he sends me these suits," and he's like, "I every time I open them up, I'm like, there's no way I would ever wear this," and then he's like, "Then I put it on, and I'm like,
hell yeah,
I kind of like this."
Yeah,
and I can see it. Yeah,
they're a bit much for me.
Yeah,
but. Jordan Peterson's a special guy.
More power to him as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. More. It's crazy. That dude's rich AF.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And just getting free suits,
Yeah.
Just said it
rich people get all the good.
Yeah.
All the good freebies.
Really nice tailored suits. Although I'm with Jordan. Well, he wears them. I would not wear those suits. Those suits are fucking hideous. Not all of them. A couple of the ones that he's worn have been all right looking.
Yeah.
And like before he started getting these like super villain suits that he's getting from this guy, you know, he wears like really nice tailored suits.
Yeah.
Those suits are great.
Yeah.
But
I
these
love
suits
it.
are a bit much.
I don't care. I love it. He's a character.
Yeah, absolutely. He is definitely a character.
While we're talking about Jordan Peterson, can you be specific about the? I haven't seen it, but the criticism he's getting for this sort of what seems to be kind of blind support for Israel in this Gaza situation. Like, what exactly is being said that people are giving him shit about?
Yeah, I mean, he just like, so from your vantage point, you can look at the situation, you know, like we did the Darryl Cooper episode.
We did an episode on him.
we did one of them episodes. You know, you can, from your vantage point, look at that situation and think of a few things to criticize Israel about, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
Jordan Peterson can't.
I see.
And it seems obvious to a lot of people why. You know,
because he works for Ben Shapiro's company. You think that's it?
Yeah, I think he threw. And you know, I hate to say this because I've got like some, you know, I'm sympathetic to Jordan Peterson to some degree, but yeah, I just feel like he like sold out, man. And it's hard for me not to feel that way. And then there's like all this stuff recently with you know, his daughter Michaela, who I don't fucking like. You know, I feel like she is more involved with his social media presence than they will admit to. I think that she like tweets from his account sometimes.
Could be, yeah.
But you know, she recently, you know, it's basically like you can't criticize Jewish people. You're not allowed to say anything about Israel or Jewish people. And Jordan Peterson made his name off of like being anti-censorship and stuff like that, and now he's like, well, you can't say things about the Jews. That's a no-no.
Yeah.
And if you do say, then you're, I mean, he's doing like gay liberal shit. Like, you know, you can't say things that are obviously true or you're a Nazi, you know. And it's like I've lost a lot of respect for Jordan Peterson over the last couple months.
Yeah, I would have to see examples of that, man, and to see how much brushing it under the rug I can do from my vantage, because I haven't seen any of that, so I'm not really entirely sure. The other thing that comes to my mind is that, you know, Jordan spent a big chunk of his career reading about the atrocities of the Second World War, so he might be in a particular sensitive position about, you know, protecting Jewish people from that sort of a thing. I'm just throwing it out there, you know.
You'd think if he'd read that much about the Second World War, he might have come across some stuff that made him have some reservations about all of the stuff that he read about the Second World War.
Yeah.
You know, it's like we've talked a lot about how history, you know, it's like the old thing of the victor writes the history, you know, and there's a lot about World War II. There's a lot about history in general that is like, who fucking knows, man? And there's a lot of stuff that doesn't add up, a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense. And he just buys, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Like the establishment line on all of it, you know, and it's not a good look, I don't think.
Yeah.
I'm having trouble with the Wi-Fi or something right now. I was trying to look up some tweets between him, Jordan Peterson, his daughter, and Nick Fuentes, but something's going on right now. I don't know.
You want to try this?
It's probably just this shitty ass laptop. No, it's okay.
While we're talking about Jewish people and history being written by the victors and all this sort of thing, you remember the last couple times we got together, I talked about listening a lot to that Gnostic Informant podcast. I've been like crushing through that. I'm skipping around some episodes, but mostly I'm really enjoying it. And like a lot of that stuff is the Dr. Amon Hillman, which we talked about. And there's lots of other scholars that he has on, and I've been really enjoying it. But Amon Hillman was one of the first episodes where I heard Neil talking about some controversial evidence that the Old Testament was written in Greek first before it was ever written in Hebrew.
Yeah.
That's Dr. Amon's contention. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Then he had this other guy on named Dr. Giorgiani. He's I've seen him before online. If you maybe you recognize his face if you saw him, but he's a expert in Iranian history and religion.
Mm-hmm.
And he comes on and he starts talking about all of these Indo-Aryan tribes in the Iranian plateau, the Scythians and the Medians and the Persians and all these people, and their influence on Judaism. So anyway, the topic I want to ask you about today is, well, I can't remember who said this. Somebody said this quote that that Christianity is basically two things together. It's this Hebrew law tradition mixed with Hellenic philosophy, and without the Hellenic philosophy, Christianity wouldn't be what it is. It would be like the Jesus movement. In the early days of Christianity, it was Jewish people in Israel, in the Galilee or whatever, following along this one guy. It was a Jewish movement inside of a Jewish society. If it weren't for the Greek influences in Christianity, the argument is that Christianity would be something very different. Maybe it would be nothing at all. Maybe it would have faded into the mist. Maybe it never would have caught on and become a world religion at all. Mm-hmm. And so there's this idea that Platonism is where it was already an established, obviously Plato goes back to 400 BC. And then you have like the Middle Platonists, which would have been around the first century. And then you have, like I don't know what they call the latter Platonists, but it was a long tradition of this very philosophical spirituality. And that was adopted whole scale by the early Christians. And the Gospel of John, as an example, mm-hmm. is a really good piece of evidence that shows how this Jewish story was completely usurped with this Greek philosophy and these Greek religious ideas like the Logos and all that sort of stuff. And so we've talked a lot about what's going on with Israel and Gaza, and we talked on our episode about Daryl Cooper about the whole history of the Israel-Palestine conflict, and one of the things that you've said is basically there's a lot of things that aren't obvious. There's a lot of things that we don't know that are behind support for Zionism and Israel, and it's not all good. Some of it's nefarious, and so it's difficult for you to just go with what seems to be the messaging in the media, which is support Israel no matter what, that sort of thing. And we've also talked about the position of Jewish people as the chosen and what that does to the cultural differences between Gentiles and Jews from the Jewish perspective. So all this stuff we've talked about. And I just wonder if Christianity truly is more of a Hellenic Greek invention, and its connections to Judaism and the Old Testament are maybe unimportant. I don't know, maybe that's too strong of a word.
Yeah, that's a bridge too far for me. I could never say that. I think that Christianity, the truth, like to say that aspect of it is unimportant. Well, I mean, Jesus is that aspect of it. It's like to say look, I believe that Christianity is true. Okay. So if you take it as just like another religion, another set of ideas that, developed over time, in the midst of other ideologies, then I can understand how someone might think that, but that's not what I think. I believe that it is the truth. And so, yeah, no, I can't say that aspect of it is not important.
Yeah.
Now, I do think that, Jewish people, they get talked up about, the IQ, and like that's a big Jordan Peterson thing. Well, the reason that they do so well is because they've got such high IQs,
Yeah.
And there's a lot to be skeptical about there. But especially when you go back that far, like the philosophy and like the theology was very rudimentary, like the Jewish aspect of it, like it's like God revealed himself to them, but they needed like that Hellenistic, like the more developed like thinking that they had, that they were much more advanced in philosophy and things like that.
Yeah.
And they kind of like fleshed it out and like made sense of it,
Yeah.
Explained it, like dug into it and,
Yeah.
Connected things and things like that.
Like some of the things I wonder about is whether we would have a Trinitarian theology in Christianity at all,
Yeah.
if it weren't for the Stoics, if it weren't for the logos philosophy of the pre-Christian Greeks,
Yeah, I think that we would, because like I said, I think it's the truth. I think that that's the truth of reality. So I think that we would, but I don't know when it would have popped up or how it would have popped up or, but I do think it would have. But yeah, I've definitely heard it. I've heard somebody, maybe it was David Patrick Harry on Church of the Eternal Logos, talk about, maybe it was Jay Dyer, I don't know. It was one of those guys, talk about some of those pre-Christian Greek philosophers being Christian, like pre-Christ Christians, like they had the philosophy and the theology like so dialed in. They were just like missing the historical, like the real aspect of it.
Yeah.
It was all, like mental.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, man, I've been doing a lot of work with pre-Socratic philosophers, and there's a lot of unexpected shit like that in there, like overlaps. So when we're talking about like Jewish theology being simplistic, and I have to say, like, I know there's a lot of complicated Jewish theology that comes from the Mishnah and the Midrash and all this development out of the Torah.
It's much later,
including
stuff.
The Kabbalah stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like that's like Middle Ages, basically.
Yeah.
But it got really sophisticated. But in the beginning, you have a creation story which seems to be borrowed from the Mesopotamians. It seems to be borrowed from the Sumerians and Babylonians to a large degree. There isn't a concept of heaven and hell. You just have an afterlife concept that was sort of generic, like the Hades type of a land of the dead sort of a thing. So they didn't have in their theology this idea of eternal heaven or eternal torment and hell. That didn't exist. They didn't have a very sophisticated like dogma about this battle of good versus evil. That's such a part of the Christian like zeitgeist. I don't know if that's the right word, but they didn't have this either. It was like, I honestly don't know. I can't elucidate it because I don't know much about these Canaanite religions, the Semitic religions that were there. I'm learning about it now, but I don't have enough to really. Well, I guess what I'm saying is these when they were captive in Babylon in like 500 BC, whenever that was, they got introduced to these Indo-Iranian people. They're related to the Indo-European people, and while they were captive in Babylon, they ended up coming back with a lot of things added to their theology that wasn't there before. So you basically have these huge and you might argue the most important chunks of what became rabbinical Judaism that came from Indo-European people. And what I mean is this idea of heaven and hell, this idea of a battle versus good and evil, this idea of the end of the world, all of this stuff. This is not Jewish. This is Persian. This is Zoroastrian, and the Zoroastrians are related to the rest of the Indo-European world, not the Semitic world.
Yeah, I think I've said this before. I think that it goes back to what I was just saying a minute ago, that I believe that Jewish story is the truth. And I believe that all of those other traditions that you're talking about, it's like a corruption of the original truth. And some of them may seem older, but they're not. Like they, you know, I think that they're a corruption of the truth, and anything that maybe it looks like it's anything that looks like it was borrowed from like Zoroastrianism and imported into like Christianity, it was the other way around. Like it came before from the original truth and then was incorporated into Zoroastrianism or whichever, you know. So then it was noticed, and you know, I don't know.
Well, if you follow that logic, if that's the case, then the idea is that hypothetically, somebody who came before the Israelites had the real fullness of the theology, forgot parts of it, and then those parts were restored by the Persians later. Is that what you're saying? Like, because
like that.
Because what that indicates is that Judaism is also corrupted.
Yeah.
And I wonder to what degree you think that is the case.
Well, I mean, if we're talking about modern Judaism, it's like completely corrupted. I mean, it's like basically like 100% corrupted. So that's something to think about. But I mean, if you read the Bible, the Old Testament is a constant. It's like, you know, God reveals himself to the Hebrew people. They follow him for a while, then they fuck off, and he has to like punish them, and then they come back, and then they, you know, it's like that cycle over and over and over again.
Yeah, absolutely.
At one point, there's a king. I think his name was Josiah. And the Hebrew people had completely forgotten the religion. You know, they had like completely replaced it with something else. And through some like visions, or somebody brought him some scrolls that they found or something, I can't remember. He, you know, brings them back to the faith. I mean, he himself was not like a perfect holy king. He wasn't like Solomon or something like that.
Yeah.
But he brought them back to the actual faith. So yeah, I mean, it being corrupted, that's in the Bible.
Yeah.
The Jewish, the Hebrew people's theology being corrupted it's a part of the story.
Yeah, that Josiah example, that wouldn't be the one that comes immediately to my mind, but the golden calf comes immediately to my mind. Moses goes up the mountain to get the commandments. When he comes back down, the people are worshiping a golden calf.
Yeah. Well, the reason I bring up Josiah is that, you know, with the one you're talking about, like Moses is going up to the mountain and talking to God. And like, as soon as he comes back down, he like puts them back on task. Right. The Josiah one, the entire nation of Hebrew people forgot. They completely forgot that this was even their religion.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why it appeals to me as an idea. It's because I have been trying to learn a little bit about what the Canaanites believed. Because at some point, the Canaanite tribes were a group of like genetically related, loosely associated people that were a little, you know, the further apart you go, the more different they were, but they were pretty much the same people. And those people worship the pantheon of gods, and Baal is one of them, right? And Moloch, all these are all names you hear in the Bible. They sacrificed children to Moloch. You know, I can't remember the story, who the characters were, but there was like the competition between the prophet of God and the prophet of Baal, remember? And they called on God to like start the fire. Like,
oh yeah. I know what you're talking about.
Whatever that story is.
Yeah.
That was a direct competition between the prophets of Yahweh and the prophets of Baal. So I'm learning about all this stuff, and it turns out that in the Old Testament, the oldest books in the Old Testament, you see the word El used for God, and the Canaanites had a high god in their religion whose name was El. Right, so you've got the group that the Jews came out of once upon a time worshipped a pantheon of gods with a high god being El, just like the ancient Greeks had the high god, the king of the gods is who? Zeus, right? And all the other gods existed, and that's how the Canaanites believed. And Yahweh was a son of El, and many scholars believe Yahweh and Baal are identical. This blew my mind, because Baal is like the word Adonis or Adonai. It just means Lord. Baal means Lord. It's not a name. And in certain of these Ugaritic texts, when they name Baal, there's like more than one name he's called. One of the names he's called is Yah. And Yah is a storm god who is the son of El. And Baal is a storm god, is the son of El, so is Yahweh. So you've got all the and Baal is called, he's called in the Ugaritic texts the cloud rider. Like that's one of those cool epithets they have, like mother of dragons, right?
Mhm.
He's the cloud rider. And the Psalms call Yahweh he who rides upon the clouds. So you got all these overlaps. And then there's this weird Christian connection to it too, because you have El as God and you have Yahweh as his son. And that's kind of this situation with Christianity. You have God as Yahweh and his son, Jesus. And the group that became the Israelites ended up swapping out or not, maybe not swapping out, but equating El with his son, right? That's how Yahweh gets to be El. That's how they get to be the same. And there are places in the Bible where God is called Yahweh and in places where he's called El. So these were two separate traditions. And at some point, the Israelites, the people that would become the Israelites, took the Son of God and made it equal to God. And that's what the Christians did with Jesus.
Mhm.
We took the Son of God and we made it equivalent. Some interesting shit I'm learning about these Canaanites. It's absolutely fascinating to me. I'm sorry, man. I don't even know where this thread was going. What do you think about any of this?
I mean, it's interesting. I think that it makes sense for that to be a product of like the people forgetting, and so, I mean, I think that a lot of these gods that these people were worshiping, I mean, I know that this kind of stuff doesn't really vibe with you all that much, although it seems like maybe you've been considering it more. I think that a lot of these things are legitimate entities. You know what I mean? I just don't think that they're God. So you've got some. What's the name of one of these gods?
Baal?
Yeah, I guess.
Astarte?
Yeah, any of them.
Asherah?
Yeah, I think that you're worshiping this deity, and it like manifests things to you, so you believe, it like shows you something and you believe, oh, this is God, but it's not God. So you get this whole like a religion based around something that is not the truth.
Yeah.
It's convincing,
Yeah.
but it's not the truth, and that's enough for people to forget the truth. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then you have to discover the truth again.
See, that's interesting because things do get rediscovered,
Mhm.
even in really important things. Even after a long stretch of time, what we notice, things get rediscovered, and it's fascinating. We also see prophets that pop up all throughout time and space, and usually when they pop up, what are they doing? They're popping up to tell you what you're doing wrong, to bring you back to the truth. That's what prophets do.
Yeah.
And there's these movements, big reform movements, like the Protestant Reformation comes to mind, but there's others like what happened with Akhenaten in ancient Egypt. He's like, there's only one God. Don't you know that? We're not going to worship any of these Egyptian gods we've been worshiping for thousands of years. Don't you know all of these gods that you call Osiris and Isis and Sekhmet and blah, blah, blah. All these gods, Ra and Atum and Ad, they're all just Aten. They're all just God, And it's like trying to bring them back to something that seems to be a restoration, not a new idea, but a restoration. And that's fascinating to me, man.
Yeah.
And we talked about the Zoroastrians earlier, and they were one of those examples. The people in Iran at the time worshipped a polytheistic pantheon, just like the Canaanites we talked about a minute ago, and theirs developed from the Vedic, from the same culture that India, that turned out India and Hinduism. And these gods that they worshipped were Ahura Mazda and Mithra and some of these people. And at some point, Zoroaster comes around and says, no, there aren't all of these gods. Well, the one that you're calling Ahura Mazda, that's all there is, man. The God, that's all there is. And so you see this reformation, and it's always positioned like bringing somebody back into the fold, back into the truth, and getting rid of these things that have been added to it that need to be removed. And another one I learned about, while I'm ranting, I want to tell you about, I never, ever heard of before until I started watching the Gnostic Informant podcast. In ancient Greece, there was a group of people who called themselves the Hypsisterians. They were monotheists in ancient Greece.
Interesting.
And the top blows off the top of my head. They worshipped Theos Hypsistos, which is why they're called Hypsisterians. When people asked them who they worshipped, they said, we worship the God Most High, Theos Hypsistos, the God Most High. And I was reading these ancient authors who were talking about the Hypsisterians, and they talk about them like in this begrudging, belittling kind of way. It's like they claim to only worship one God. These guys over here,
Yeah,
they pretend like there's only one God. That's how the ancients were thinking about them. But these were people in the classical Greece, the height of polytheism, who I don't even know, were they influenced by Jews? I don't know, but they decided no. There's no Zeus and Kronos and Hades and all this. There's just Theos Hypsistos.
Yeah.
What in the hell, man?
Yeah, I mean, so if you think about it, I know this, again, this kind of thing is not necessarily, doesn't jive with the way that you think about things, but imagine, if you will, that God created Adam and Eve, and that it happened exactly like it's laid out in the Bible. That story is the truth. And then eventually you get people who start splitting off and having their own ideas, and they forget, like we've been talking about. And you have to imagine that some of them are going to spiral out and, invent religions that are just completely crazy and like antithetical to what was the truth, But then you have to imagine that some of them are going to keep a hold of more of the truth than others,
Yeah.
So, yeah, it like honestly doesn't really surprise me that there would be monotheists in ancient Greece, You said it like blew the top of your head off. It doesn't like blow the top of my head off.
I'll tell you, like, in some ways, I feel silly saying that because I just got done talking about all these pre-Socratic philosophers. I didn't go into depth but I mentioned that there's all these pre-Socratic philosophers that have beliefs that would surprise you.
Mm-hmm.
So in a polytheistic society, you have these people that come out and say, the world is made of one substance.
Yeah.
And that substance is divine. Like, that sounds a lot like monotheism. They said shit like that.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of them said shit like that. Parmenides, Heraclitus, Pythagoras, all these guys. But I think what made me blow the top off my head was thinking about some kind of an organized religion. Not just like people with their own philosophy and had an interpretation of, but a real organized religion with people who worshipped Theos Hypsistos in lieu of and didn't believe in any of the other gods.
Why is that more surprising to you?
I guess the idea of like religions competing with the classical Greek religion in classical Greece. I guess that's surprising. I guess I don't imagine that they were like that there was religious liberty, and that people could just be allowed to do something so radically different. Like if you think about what happened with Socrates, they said Socrates was contaminating the youth. That's not the word. Corrupting the youth, because he was making these young people question religious ideas just by asking questions. But he was rocking the boat, and they killed him. They threw him in jail and killed him.
They did.
So a place that does that to protect their youth from hearing ideas that might rock the religious boat, to in that same place have a organized religion of people that were allowed to live and believe something so different. I don't know, man. And how, with having the interest that I have, how did I never come across this?
There's a lot of information out there, man. It's like you can't. It's like like if you spend the rest of your life reading this kind of stuff, you won't be able to read it all, probably. So
You're right about that.
It's a lot out there. Don't beat yourself up too much.
Yeah.
But I just like you're talking about these pre-Socratic philosophers and their ideas and why, like it doesn't surprise you that they had those views, but it does surprise you that there's like an organized religion. I feel like a lot of the ideas that those pre-Socratics had, like they were just they were like unsuccessful cult leaders. You know what I mean? Like they could have had
Some were
organized.
successful.
Yeah, that's true.
Pythagoras.
Yeah. He had a gang. But you know what I mean? Like they had their ideas, and maybe it's not unsuccessful. I think a lot of them were not interested. They didn't care to like evangelize their ideas, you know? So, but like, it just doesn't, I don't know. It just doesn't surprise me that there would be like movements of religions and, you know, it just doesn't surprise me.
I collected a bunch of these ideas like we're talking about right now, and I put it together in the last solo podcast I did. I called it Paleo Deo. Mm-hmm. So if you get around to it, I'd be curious to hear what you might think. It's like an hour and a half, so I thought it was going to be longer, but because I just
whittled it down.
I basically had an outline, and I just kind of stuck with the outline. If I would have let myself go deep, I could have
really filled
fucked
up some
around.
Time.
There's a couple other little details that came up that I put in that episode that I want to mention just because I think they're interesting, and I'm gonna look at your face while I tell you these things, try to get an idea of whether they are interesting or whether it's just for me. All right, you know how we were talking about El. The word El is a name, right? It's a proper name in the Canaanite religion. El was like Zeus. The name of the god, the high god, was El. But El also meant God, and that's why you have some. There's like some weird things in the Bible to do with God and gods and El and Elohim and all these different things. Elion, it's weird and interesting. Where am I going with this? So El means the proper name of the high God, but it also means God. So if I was going to say I went to the temple and worshipped the God or a God, I would say I went to the temple to worship an El.
It's a proper noun and an improper
noun.
Yeah.
Yes. So that I think is interesting. Like I think that is interesting. It almost makes me think that, to your point, when you said about forgotten, it almost makes me think that El was originally in the Canaanite religion understood to be the only God. The high God was the only God. Mm-hmm. El was the supreme being. And that's why his name, now that there's other gods, that word has to become a name to differentiate the high God from the other gods. But originally it was just one God. And so his name and what he is were the same. And that's interesting to me. I think it means something. But it's also interesting when you think of Zeus. Zeus is the word Deus in Greek. Deus means God, right? Yeah. And then you have in the Sumerian, if you go back to the most ancient religion, you have their high god. His name was An or Anu. And the logogram, which is the cuneiform whatever symbol that means An, also means God in the singular. So you have Zeus, El, and An, the high gods of these three religions, and all of them mean the name of the God, but also the word God. Mm-hmm. So it to me, the argument is more powerful that there's some kind of a monotheism behind it, because it's not just one example of it. There's three very significant examples. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me.
And to deepen this a little bit more, this is controversial, but the word An or Anu in the Sumerian may be cognate with the Proto-Indo-European word for one. And that's controversial because nobody really has solid reason to believe that the Indo-Europeans had any connection with the Sumerians at all. However, An or Anu sounds a lot like Ein, Un, Uno. Does it not?
It does. I wonder what Asha Logos would have to say about that. I bet he'd have some hot theories.
Got to tweet that dude. Yeah. So this whole episode I did most recently was about primitive monotheism. It's kind of this idea that we're talking about. I don't know, man. I could keep going, but I'll let you chime in.
No, I think that's interesting. I really do. I believe that all other religions that seem to be older than the Christian ideas, I believe that they're just corruptions and that Christianity is the truth. So I think that what you're talking about like makes sense. I think that fits with that idea.
I think it does.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. But then you have to take stories like ones that appear in the Bible, let's take a common example like the flood,
Noah's Ark,
flood
yeah.
story. If you're saying that there's a truth behind this story, and I think there is, and it was corrupted, right? And you take like the Babylonian version, the Greek version, you take the Hebrew version. How do you know which one is the corrupted one? Which
The one in the Bible is the true one.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least it's the closest to the truth that we could possibly have. That's what I believe.
Yeah.
And yeah, all of these other ones are, they're like, they're like feeling around in the dark for the same idea, but they've got things wrong. This process of, worshiping other gods and forgetting, just corrupts them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. There's this really interesting part at the end of the Greek flood story, the Deucalion myth, where the floods subside and Deucalion and his wife Pyrrha get off the boat, and there's no other people, right? They don't have their kids with them. There's no other people, and they make the altar, because that's what happens, right? After the floods, the Noah gets out, he makes the altar and burns the incense. This happens in all the various versions of the story, and the gods basically accept the sacrifice, and they say, we'll give you whatever you ask for. And Deucalion asks for people. He wants to repopulate the earth. And this is the cool part of the story. I don't know if you'll find it cool, but it's charming. So the God tells Deucalion, I'll give you whatever you want. He says he wants people. The instruction that he's given is to take the bones of his mother and throw them over his shoulder. And he doesn't quite understand what that means. And then it dawns on him that Mother Earth is his mother. So he reaches down and he takes stones from the ground. Those are the bones of his mother. And he throws them over his shoulder and into the water. And every one that he throws turns into a man. A full-grown man comes out of the water. And every one that his wife throws becomes a woman. And that's the story they tell about how the world is repopulated after the flood.
He's just throwing a bunch of stones.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
I was gonna say something. I lost it though.
Shit.
I don't think it was that interesting anyways, but
I'm a blabbermouth.
yeah, it happens, man. You get going on something you're interested in.
Oh,
It's good though. It's good for the podcast.
There's another part of this that I can run by you. We talked about this before, but never so explicitly. So one of the things that I talk about in that episode that I did is because it's kind of based on that Wilhelm Schmidt guy that I read, that German feller. And he wrote this book called High Gods of North America. And he wrote all these primitive monotheism or primitive revelation. That's one right there. And he talks all about these tribal groups that are primitive, that he calls them the ethnologically oldest peoples on earth. What he means by that is people that live the most today like they did 20,000 years ago. Yeah. Like he wants to look at those groups and see what their religion's like, so that he can try to understand what the oldest forms of religion were like. It makes perfect sense as far as I'm concerned. But not only that, he wants to compare them. So if there's a people like that live in Tierra del Fuego, way down in South America, and there's a group like that live in California, and there's a group like that live in the Siberia, then he takes their religions and he examines them and he says, these are some of the oldest religions in the world. What do they have in common? What, if I was trying to imagine what would have given birth to these religions that was common, what would it look like? Very interesting shit, Wilhelm Schmidt. And he talks about this idea of high gods. And the question is, if a society has a high god, he's usually the creator, first of all, like the Great Spirit of Native Americans. He's usually the creator, but he's also the thing from which all the other gods or spiritual powers come from. So if there are other gods, they were created or came from the Great Spirit. That's why he's the high god, because he created everything and everything comes from him. And even though there might be other, distinct spiritual beings that exist under him, there's still this high god, Great Spirit type guy. Now, this is an idea that has a name. It's called henotheism.
Okay.
And henotheism is basically, in a nutshell, a religion that believes in a high god, but allows for the existence of other gods. And the argument Wilhelm Schmidt makes is, how is that not monotheism? And I have to agree. This goes back to the conversation we had about angels and demons in a Christian perspective. Mm-hmm. It's like we accept the idea that God exists, but there's also these lesser spiritual beings, archangels and angels and, you know, whatever. So is that henotheism?
I don't know. I can see why you might categorize it as that easily. You know, that makes sense to me. But to me, angels and demons are not gods. You know what I mean?
It depends what you mean by God, I guess. But yeah.
I guess it does.
Let's
but
dig into
in
that.
a Christian sense, angels and demons are not gods. Like they're not.
You're correct. We wouldn't call them gods. We wouldn't call them God for sure. But we would call them supernatural.
Sure.
We'd call them immortal. We'd call them superhuman. And that's the definition of a classical God. Some invisible force that has power over you, that is affects, you know, everyone equally, you know, has the ability to impose on you. I mean,
do you think that God, in your worldview, could God, you know, like let's pick a demon, you know, like Azrael or something like that. Actually, Azrael might be an angel.
Yeah, Azazel, but there's like a dark angel, right? Azazel from the Book of Enoch.
Yeah, I can't. But whatever demon you want to pick. Could God? You said that they're immortal.
Mm-hmm.
Can God destroy the angel?
Absolutely.
So it's not immortal.
Yeah, sure.
So, but can anything destroy God?
No.
So that's the difference. I mean,
yeah, absolutely. Agreed.
Yeah. So that's like, again, I can understand why you would classify that as henotheism, you said, but I don't think that it fits. I think that there's only one God.
Yeah. And I just wonder how much of this has to do with how we define God. And I think that interests me more than any other subject, is understanding what people mean when they say God. Because it's so different. It's way more different than you think. And I don't know that I've met anybody who would agree with me fully in how I conceive of God.
That everything is God.
Well, I mean, I could be more complicated, but if I was simplifying it, yeah, there are people who would agree with me on that, but very few.
I don't know. I think people are catching on to you, you know?
So
that kind of thing seems like, to me, it does seem like it's becoming more popular.
Yeah. You know what I resist about that is, we've talked about this before, but the types of people that think that, and how far they go in directions I would never go, makes me like, I don't want to associate myself with them exactly.
Yeah, me neither.
All right, sorry. Let me give you a question, like, to compare this henotheism we just went through with God and the angels and demons. If we take that instead and we look at the Canaanite model that we talked about earlier, El is on top. He created all the other gods so he could crush them if he wants, you know, even though the other gods are all immortal, right? They're all like him in many ways, superior to human beings in many ways, spiritual beings. But he's their creator. They're subservient to him. I guess my question is, how is that not monotheism? So an example that bridges these two is Hinduism. So in Hinduism, they believe there is only one God. The one God is Brahman. And that God is made up of hundreds of thousands of emanations, of avatars and expressions of that God. And every one of those gods has a face and stories they tell about them and sacrifices they make. They have names and they worship them as though they're separate, but they believe that at the deepest level, they aren't separate. And that's how I see this idea of henotheism. Any polytheistic society that has a high God isn't a polytheistic society. They're a henotheistic society.
I guess it just depends. Yeah, like you said, it just depends on how you define God, what a God is. But I suspect that some of them you would not be able to call monotheistic, you know, because they do define those other things as gods. You know what I mean? So maybe some of them, you know, like you said with Hinduism, you could say that is technically monotheism, but I just don't think that all of them would be. I don't think you could consider them all monotheistic. Some of them, I think, would clearly define themselves as polytheistic.
I think so. And I think that I would disagree with them to their face.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like
Yes. Whatever
like
you're going to say,
like
yes.
arrogant.
Oh,
You know,
yes,
it's like
it is.
I know your religion better than you do. That just like you have to. You, I feel like the road you're going down is like borderline a road of like these churches that have the rainbow flags out there, and they're like,
man.
and they're like, I know Christianity better than the church fathers. You know, like it just seems silly to me. It's like sometimes you have to take people for their word. You know what I mean? You can't like explain things for them. You know, it's like, well, they say this, but what they really mean is this, you know, because I don't know. I just feel like it's like borderline like making excuses for dumb shit.
Yeah. Listen, I know what you're saying. That was something.
Well, I don't think that they're real. First of all, you know, like these religions, I don't think that they're true. So whether or not they're monotheistic or polytheistic to me is like irrelevant. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So we were talking about this idea of having kind of the truth and forgetting it, or parts of it gets corrupted and so forth. So I would assume you would agree that in a place like India, where the religion is so complicated and so dynamic and so different, there are people like I just described that do accept the interpretation that their religion is monotheistic. And I would assume you would agree that those people are hanging on to some uncorrupted understanding.
Well, I mean, they're still extremely corrupted, but yeah, like that aspect of it is a little less corrupted, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, obviously they're still extremely corrupted.
Mm.
But yeah, I don't know where were you going with that?
I don't know, wherever I went with it.
Yeah, I don't know. So that idea that Hindu is monotheistic, it's not accepted by all of them. That's like it's like a sectarian kind of a thing.
I wish I knew, man. Like
Okay.
I had a conversation with a few people from India that I was able to ask some religious questions to. Most recently, a couple that were parents of a friend of my daughter's, and we were invited over, so I was asking them questions. I had an opportunity to, and they pretty much agreed with everything I said to you just now about the Trimurti, which is what they call this: Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahma being one God.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, is that really the Hindu perspective, that all these various gods that you have really are just sort of like expressions of Brahma? And they just nodded their heads like, yes.
Yeah.
So if that's a common belief, and I think there's a lot more diversity in Hinduism than I can appreciate, because I just don't know. But if that's a common belief, that's an orthodox belief, I think Hinduism is monotheistic.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in my podcast, I don't open with any of this. I open with Occam's razor, which is like, I think the least interesting proof or defense of this idea of primitive monotheism, but it's an interesting one. And it's just like, if the simplest conception is the best conception, that's what Occam's razor tells you, then would you not think that a belief in one God comes before a belief in many? Is a belief in one God simpler than a belief in many? And to me, it seems that seems to be the case.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
That seems to make sense to me. I try to like put myself in other people's shoes, and like maybe I could conceive of a way and where maybe it would make sense but my natural and just, like I said, the fact that I'm a Christian, it just seems monotheism seems like out of the gate before you even have any information to make more sense.
Yeah. So I said earlier that one of the things that's most interesting to me is people's conception of God. If you had to define it for somebody, I'm not really sure how the best way to ask the question, but I guess I want to ask you that question. What is God?
God is the creator of everything, the giver of life. God is like the fountain of everything.
Yeah.
Not just like stuff, but like love, like the uncreated energies of God that we can experience. Like he's the fountain of all of that,
Do you think there's any theist person of any religion that would disagree with that?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't either. I don't disagree with it. But the reason I kind of was wondering whether you would lead with creator, because I would.
Yeah.
But it's not obvious to me that other people, that's the first thought. God equals creator. Because to me, that's the math. That's the first thing that comes to my mind.
I honestly don't know. I think it was kind of the first thing that I said. But I don't know that if I'm thinking of God at like the base of what that means, that I do think of creator, because God existed before he created anything,
Yeah.
So I think that there is some kind of like a base element of God that is before creator, but for us, the creator aspect is important because we're creations,
right. Yeah.
So I can understand why the creator thing is so important to creations.
Yeah. Yeah. So the idea of creation and the idea of life, the source of that, like those are the things that come to my mind as well. I associate them all together. Yeah. Creation, life, consciousness. I don't think.
Yeah. Well, there's something about that, the life and consciousness, that there was life and there was consciousness before God created anything. So yeah, there's something about that.
So I don't know how you would explain that. Maybe you would say the uncreated energies. Maybe that's how you would explain it. I would call that, I call it potentiality. That's what I call it when I talk about it.
Yeah.
And that's very important. That's like, it's not clear to me that there's any difference between me saying God and potentiality. And by potentiality, I mean whatever it is that makes something possible. Mm-hmm. Something or everything, Yeah.
No.
And that is associated with Platonic forms. And that's part of what I was getting at earlier when I was talking about the Hellenic origins of Christianity or the Christian theology. It's like even something like that is Platonic. The idea that there was a form or an essence of something before it ever was manifested, and that it exists in a place called nous. It exists in the disembodied cosmic mind. Jesus Christ, the hair stands up in my arms when I say it. That is a Platonic idea, but that is so deeply, deeply Christian, And Plato lived 400 years before Christ was born.
Yeah. That word nous, that's a word that I had never heard before until I started like dabbling in Orthodox Christianity. That's, nous is a big part of it.
And logos too. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know, man. I've really been thinking about going back to an Orthodox church recently.
Yeah.
I like that Lutheran church. But I don't know, man. There's just something about Orthodoxy. There's just really something about it.
There is.
We gotta have. I'm gonna be having Proxenos back on.
Oh, good.
This week, Thursday.
Oh,
That's
nice.
what we're looking at. But I would like to have him on with you.
Yeah, me too.
I feel like that would be a good conversation.
I would jump on. What time are you doing it on Thursday?
I don't know yet. We still haven't narrowed that down.
Okay.
Probably 7, 8.
Okay.
Somewhere in there.
Yeah. So I may or may not be able to. I'm traveling. I have to go to Columbus on Thursday. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, what we're going to be talking about on Thursday is it wouldn't really. I mean, I'm sure we could get into it, but we're talking about something specific. So.
What do you guys have in mind?
It's going to kind of be a continuation of what we talked about last time, media. We're going to talk about that show Reset that I told them that I would watch. I still have 2 more episodes to watch, but I'll be able to finish those by Thursday.
That'll be interesting.
Yeah. But yeah, once we knock the Reset thing out, and I mean, I'm sure that we'll still talk about media type stuff in the future, but I want to have him on. Andrew from the Crucible is supposed to be debating this guy named Haz al-Din, who is a
Muslim.
Yes, he is a Muslim.
Yeah.
Well, actually, honestly, I don't know if he
Oh,
is a Muslim.
oh.
He's an Arab.
See, I just jumped to conclusions.
You racist.
Golly.
But he's a communist.
Oh.
And he's what I would describe as a based communist.
What does that mean?
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but there's this other guy, Jackson Hinkle, too. He calls himself a MAGA communist. So
what does that mean?
You'll have to wait and find out. I actually like Jackson Hinkle. I knew about Jackson Hinkle before Proxenos mentioned him to me, but this other guy, Hazaldin, I'd never heard of him. But Proxenos's position is that, like traditionalists, like kind of Christian populist type people, we should align ourselves with these based communist, MAGA communist type people, because we have a lot of the same ends.
I would be very interested to hear that out, but I also wonder how many of them there could possibly be. And I wonder if they line up with like a theocracy, like a Christian theocracy, like a
Yeah, well, I'm down for that. I've got less and less of a problem with that.
Is there a name for a Christian caliphate? Oh, there is. Christendom. We just forgot about that. Christendom.
Well,
you remember that?
Christendom back, baby.
I like that. Christendom.
I've been going down a rabbit hole. I mentioned it to you when we went to that dinner that almost killed me. The Spanish Civil War and Francisco Franco, who just got a lot of respect for, man.
Tell me about it, man.
Franco's a really interesting guy, and a dictator, a military dictator, but you don't hear. And I mean, if you look back, the Spanish Civil War happened kind of like right before World War II, maybe even they bled into each other a little bit. But Spain didn't really get involved in World War II, but they were aligned with the Axis, they didn't get involved, but they were like very sympathetic to Germany, Italy, and Japan. Although they broke with Japan because Japan did some terrible things to Spanish people in like the Philippines. So they told Japan to hit the road. But yeah, I mean, Franco, dude, the Spanish Civil War, it's like Hitler's got this, he's Hitler, you say his name, everyone recoils, but then you look at like the kind of stuff that he was fighting against. And, I was just talking about these MAGA communists and Hazaldin and these people, but the types of communists that Hitler and Franco were going up against, they're like the worst people in the history of the world.
Yeah.
Like literally, they're like, I don't know, like Satan manifest on earth, and just, I don't know, man, just something about Franco. He doesn't have that stink, that Hitler stink on him. You know what I mean? And one part of that, I think, is that he was very Catholic, and Spain was basically like a Catholic military dictatorship when he was in power.
Interesting. Yeah.
Super interesting. You should, I'll say
that's a part of history that I don't know much about, man.
Yeah.
Boy, I don't know where to go. I kind of want to talk to you about that Shimon guy.
Shimon?
What is his name? The guy that argues with all the Muslims online.
Sam Shamoon. Yeah.
Sam Shamoon. I've been eating that dude up.
Yeah, Sam Shamoon.
And I feel like
hard.
I feel like maybe understanding your perspective on the Crucible more, watching him.
Yeah.
Because in every case, I am on his side.
Yeah, yeah.
And so in every case, I'm happy when he proves his point. And I don't have a whole lot of resistance to him being forceful about it, because he does sometimes,
Yeah.
But before I talk about him, I want to tell you about Diogenes really quickly, because that's another topic that I've been introduced to.
Diogenes.
There are more than one.
Diogenes is the guy who met Alexander the Great.
Yes, so you know that already.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, did that come up in the Dan
I've
Carlin?
known that for a long time. I don't think it did in the most recent Dan Carlin thing, but that's like such a good story.
Yeah,
I definitely heard that before.
Well, I'll tell you what I picked up from this one podcast I was listening to, and you tell me, you correct me or add anything that you happen to know. So there's more than one Diogenes from
but this
antiquity.
Is the Diogenes.
Yeah. But there was a Diogenes who lived around the time of Socrates and Plato, and in fact he would go to Plato's academy. first of all, I want you to know Diogenes is a lot like Socrates. He goes around talking to people like Socrates does. He causes a lot of trouble. He tries to like shake things up in unexpected ways, and he has all these famous quotes. If you read them, you'll see what I'm talking about. Where he's a character, and one of the things that he's said to have done is Plato in his academy made some pronouncement about what an essence of a human being is, what it means to be a human being, and Diogenes goes out. He picks up a chicken. He walks into the academy with the chicken. He's not a member of the academy. He's a crazy man that lives in a barrel in the middle of town. Yep. He lives in a barrel.
Masturbates in public.
Yeah. Walks around naked. So he brings this chicken into the academy, and he just says, "Behold, Plato's man," and then just walks out. This is a guy that one of the stories told about him is that he didn't want to rely on anything. He wanted to live as simply as possible. So the only thing he owned was a comb and a cup. So he could drink and he could clean himself.
Comb seems unnecessary if that's what you're really going for, you know?
The story goes, this is all he had. And then one day he saw a child drinking with his hands and a man combing his beard with his fingers, and he threw away the only two things that he had left. He realized he didn't need them. This is the kind of guy I'm talking about. And there are other stories that I can't remember that were all fascinating, but it came up in the context of that some of the stories that were told about Diogenes also became stories about Jesus. So for some reason, there was people telling stories that were about Diogenes as though they were stories about Jesus. It's kind of interesting. I'm not really sure why, but the story I'm getting to, which you already know, is that when Alexander the Great conquered, he first came from Macedon down into Athens. He conquers. Diogenes is there when it happens.
And Diogenes is also like kind of known because Alexander the Great knows who he is.
Yeah. He's like infamous, or what's the word I'm looking for?
Infamous seems like a good word.
Yeah, he's like infamous. Anyway, so they conquer Athens. Alexander the Great himself comes up behind Diogenes and he says something to him, expecting him to kneel, I guess, expecting something. And Diogenes doesn't even look back to see that it's Alexander. He just tells him to get out of his light.
Yeah.
And then they become friends because Alexander's so taken aback that somebody would talk to him that way because he's fucking Alexander, you know? And then Alexander has this famous quote. He said, if I weren't Alexander, I would want to be Diogenes. Yeah. I don't know if I butchered that or not. You got anything to add?
No, that's about all I know about it too.
Alexander the Great, conqueror of the known world, greatest military, mind maybe of all time, certainly a legend. And he was like, if I wasn't already this awesome, I would want to be the naked man that lives in the barrel in the middle of Athens. I wonder
if we could like grant Alexander that, if he would really feel that way. Because Diogenes is interesting. Obviously an intelligent person, but also fucking crazy. And like a lot not to admire.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm pretty sure I might be mixing him up with someone else, although this seems very Diogenes. He died because he had some kind of like skin condition, and he buried himself in a hole from the neck down in like shit, like manure.
Oh Jesus!
Because he thought that it would like leach whatever this problem was, and he died from that.
Wow, I didn't hear that story, but that's nuts.
So obviously, this guy's fucking crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I wonder if we could like do what was that? What's that movie where the people switch places? I think it's like Lindsay Lohan.
Yeah. What is it called?
I forget. Freaky Friday? Is that Freaky Friday?
Yes.
Man, digging way back into my teenage years. But yeah, if we could Freaky Friday Diogenes and Alexander the Great, I wonder if Alexander would be like, "Get me the fuck out of here."
Somebody needs to make that movie and make it a comedy.
Yeah, that would be good.
Make it a comedy starring.
Who's playing Alexander? He didn't live to be that old.
Yeah.
So
who's playing Alexander? But it's got to be somebody funny. I don't know, man.
He might be getting a little bit old at this point. But I think James Franco's brother, Dave Franco.
Yeah,
I think he could be good.
Yeah, he could do it.
And then for Diogenes, we just got some
Diogenes. It has to be Has to be McBride, Danny McBride.
McBride, yeah, that'd be good. Oh yeah.
All right, can we talk about Sam Shimon?
Yeah, sure.
So I don't really have. I've watched a handful of his videos. I've enjoyed him arguing with Muslims.
You've probably watched more of him than I have, honestly. At this point,
that guy has a command of the Bible that's so impressive, but he has a command of the Quran and the Hadiths that are as impressive. And he speaks Arabic. So when he gets in an argument with these Muslims and they disagree with him, and he starts using the Arabic words and talking about what they mean and like quoting these Hadiths, it is fucking impressive, man.
Yeah.
He was so. I just want to tell you one story that sticks in my mind. He was talking to this older, like imam dude. I don't know if he was an imam, but he was wearing a hat that led me to believe he was some kind of a holy man. And the argument, the debate was Muhammad a legitimate prophet? Was Muhammad a real prophet? And that's what they were trying to argue about. And the argument went everywhere. But basically at the very end, he's finally trying to rein this guy in. And he's like, give me evidence that Muhammad was a legitimate prophet. And he gives him this verse from the Quran. Now remember, Muhammad was supposed to have received the Quran from the angel, Gabriel or whatever. So he's just regurgitating whatever this message he's getting from heaven. And one of these passages is like 9 statements in this surah, in this chapter of the Quran. And this old man is describing, he reads all 9 of these, and then he shows you how 1 and 9 are associated and 2 and 8 are associated, and right. So there's like this weird mathematical perfection in the chapter. And he's saying, this is how I know Muhammad was a legitimate prophet, because that level of sophistication, no human could do that.
Okay.
And my jaw about hit the floor, because I have no idea if that is a common like argument that Muslims use to justify whether Muhammad was a real prophet. But it's like, okay, I can see you're saying that there's some sophisticated mathematical relationship in these 9 sentences, and that a human being could do that. Are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah.
If you give me 10 minutes, I could do that.
Yeah.
Like, all I need is a little time to make it work, and I can make it work. That doesn't convince an 8-year-old.
Not impressive.
Not impressive. And that's the only point that he was able to make in the whole argument that was really directed to try to answer the question, was Muhammad a genuine prophet? And that was it. And I just wonder, like, what else? Like, what else? Like, it can't just be that. Like, I know it's just one small example. It has to be, right? Like, that's not a compelling, Muslims don't think that's a compelling argument, do they? Anyway, it was very strange, man.
I wonder how many of them do think that that's a compelling argument, because like sometimes people will make arguments for Christianity, and it's like a lot of Christians are like, shut the fuck up. Stop talking. You're making us look so stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
he could have been one of those people. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know anything about Islam really, so it's hard for me to say.
Sam Shimon rips those people up, and he does not hold back. He's more respectful. He always maintains some modicum of respect, more or less. But he told them, your prophet is evil. The God you worship is the devil. Like, in no uncertain terms, he's telling them that. And then he goes on and on and on about how Muhammad, had a wife, Aisha, and she was, almost certainly a child when they were married. And in Islam, they have this belief. It's called muta. And muta means you can marry a woman temporarily. Mm-hmm. And the idea is, if you want to have sex with a woman, you can't do that unless you're married, right? Yeah. But you can do muta, which means I'm going to marry you for a month. I'm going to bang it out with you. And then I'm going to divorce you, and I'm going to compensate you for your trouble. So it's basically a legalized form of prostitution to get around this idea that you have to be married. Yeah. Right.
It reminds me of all the goofy Shabbos shit in Judaism.
Yeah.
It's like they're tricking God.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. How silly.
It's stupid.
Yeah. What else was he hammering him on?
That's Shapiro, dude. Like, he's like got one of these fucking, it's just so fucking stupid, man.
Yeah.
And Jordan Peterson's working for that guy. Jordan Peterson's Ben Shapiro's little puppet.
Oh, another one of those things that he mentioned was the Quran talks about how long once you're divorced, how long you have to wait to get remarried.
Yeah.
And there's different rules for different people. So if you have already started menopause, you're not going to have any more kids, you only have to wait 3 months before you can get remarried. But somebody who is fertile has to wait longer. And then there's this thing about how long do you wait if the person hasn't had their period yet? Right? So let me just be clear. Somewhere in the Quran, and I can't be specific here, I'm just regurgitating third hand, but somewhere in the Quran it talks about if you marry a girl who hasn't had her period yet,
Prepubescent.
and then you divorce her,
yeah.
how long does she have to wait to get remarried? And so Sam is like, look, you guys are perfectly okay with fucking kids. You have a rule in here about how long this prepubescent girl has to wait before she can be remarried to someone, and she's been married to you and she's not even bleeding, right? It's like, and you should see the freaking dancing that these people do around this stuff.
Yeah.
And he holds them to the fire, and it is fun to watch, man.
Yeah, I would imagine watching them squirm is fun to watch. But you know what's really depressing about that is that's what Europe is becoming. Welcome to Europe, where Sam Shamoon can just destroy all of them. And I wish that people would take it more seriously, because a lot of these cucked Europeans are like, oh, we need to be letting more of them in. No, you don't. You need to be kicking the amount that you have out.
Yeah, it's crazy, man.
And a lot of people will say they don't all believe that. I think that you'd be surprised how many of them do.
Yeah.
And I've known a lot of. I shouldn't say a lot. I've known some Muslim people that I like. That are very nice people. But honestly, I think that even those people that I liked, if you really got them candidly, they might, like when they're around their Muslim friends, they might be okay with that kind of stuff too.
Yeah. I had a little bit of that I noticed with Mejdi. So he had one friend around one time that was our age, and I was asking him about Hamas or something years and years ago. And
that's a tricky one.
Well, Mejdi was like trying to back away from that subject, and his friend looked at him and said,
"Stop bullshitting."
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like the impression I got was that if I weren't there, the conversation would have been very different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, that's a tricky one, because that's so much more shade. There are many more shades of gray in terms of whether or not you can support Hamas for geopolitical, reasons. But marrying and divorcing and molesting, prepubescent children, that's a little less, that's a little more black and white for me, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know that, there are aspects of what Hamas does that it's like, I'm not going to bullshit. It's like, what else are they supposed to fucking do, man? They don't have tons of options, and they just have to accept their fate from these people that hate them. And people want to act like if Hamas set down the weapons that the war would be over. I don't fucking believe that, man. I think that these Jewish people, they feel that they are entitled to all of that land, and that they would be happy to exterminate the people who are there. But for some reason, they're the good guys, just unquestionably, they're the good guys.
Yeah.
Again, I don't really give a fuck about the, I hate to be a dickhead. I really don't give a fuck about the Palestinian people. I mean, I don't want them to die, but I don't care.
Yeah. You're not invested in it. Right?
Yeah. But yeah, this idea that I have to believe that the Zionists are the good guys all the time. And, we're getting back to my criticisms of Jordan Peterson. Go fuck yourself, man. I have a lot of respect for him in a lot of ways, but yeah, his outlook on this whole thing is just, I can't take it seriously.
So I don't know if you care to do this, but I would be interested if you collected clips and you played them and we could talk about them. I'd be interested to see, first of all, what kind of examples you're referring to, but I'm also curious to see whether because I'm going to have an instinct to defend Jordan, and I know I'm going to, and I'm going to be honest with you about it. like that's something that I have to fight. Everyone's got their own biases. I like Jordan Peterson. He's been an important influence on me.
Yeah,
I'm going to want to be defensive, but I'm curious how much I would agree and how much I'd want to, like, what I would push back against. I'm just curious.
Yeah,
because I haven't really been paying
we
attention.
can do that for sure.
Yeah.
That would be interesting. But it like kind of goes hand in hand with people like what's the dude's name? Professor, like renegade professor. Jewish fella.
Gadsad.
That's him. Gadsad.
Renegade.
You know, like I guess I understand it a little bit more coming from Gadsad. Because he is Jewish. But
and lived through the Lebanese Civil War.
But it's just like that almost makes me. It almost makes me. It's harder for me to take him seriously because of that. You know, it's like you're on your team. You don't care about the truth. You know, you're not willing to recognize the truth of these people's situation because they're on the opposite team of you. You know. But yeah, it's harder for me to understand with Jordan. I honestly, at this point, I think I hate to say it, but I think a lot of it boils down to money.
Could be. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, it does change. Things do change. I mean,
and for as intrepid as he was in his early career, I think it has to do with money and it has to do with not wanting to be canceled because. I mean, things seem to be changing, you know, like criticizing Israel. People are like lightening up on it, you know, because I think that Israel and Zionists and these people have overplayed their hand in the last, few decades. They've just been continually overplaying their hand. But it's really started to change recently. And one of the earliest clips that I can remember of Jordan Peterson exposing the way that he felt was before he worked for the Daily Wire. Somebody, he would do his events and they would have Q&As and somebody asked him a question and they had given him a book before. It was like a book that they translated because there was not an English translation of it. It's a book called 200 Years Together by Solzhenitsyn. And it breaks down a lot of, the Jewish involvement in like the Bolshevik revolution, things like that. And the guy asked Jordan Peterson some kind of a question. I can't remember specifically what the question was, but Jordan Peterson would not answer it. He just he sat up there and he hemmed and he hawed. And then eventually he was like, I can't do it, and just didn't answer the question. And that was the first time I was like, oh, yeah, that's interesting.
I'd like to see it. Yeah.
I haven't seen that clip in forever. I could probably still find it though.
Well, I want to circle back to what we were saying about the Muslim migrant situation in Europe and in the U.S. First of all, I've been seeing some interesting statistics lately. One of them said like three major cities in Denmark are now more than 50% non-native. And then I saw a video of like the hallways of the school, and there's barely any white kids.
Yeah,
in Denmark.
It sucks because my instinct, if I lived in Denmark, would be to get the fuck out of Denmark. But that just makes the problem worse.
It does, yeah.
These are the kind of reasons why we need a Franco. Somebody who is like, I don't fucking care if it makes you uncomfortable. I'm going to do what's right. And you can cry all you want to about me being a dictator, me being an authoritarian, but we're going to take care of this.
That kind of sounds like what Javier Milei is doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Bukele in El Salvador.
Yeah.
More Bukele than Milei.
And there's elections going on, I think, in Venezuela today. They're supposed to be
good. Hopefully they get some of that going on.
Wouldn't that be something?
Yeah. Hopefully we get some of that going on.
Partly the reason why I was bringing up this migrant situation, and I've been seeing a lot of examples in Ireland of people getting seemingly pretty fed up with it. But it for me, it boils down to what's the word? There's a word for that I can't think of that means to adopt the culture that you're trying to exist among. What's the word?
Integration. Something
like that. I think that
naturalization.
No, not the legal process. Just just like the process of immigrants coming to America and saying, "Look, I'm American."
Okay.
Right. I'm no longer what I was. I'm American. My kids are American. So whatever that word is on the tip of my tongue, that isn't happening anymore. And that seems to be a bigger problem than just the racial one that people listening might be thinking we're pointing to. That's not exactly what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you have people who not only refuse to accept your culture, they have a partially, not entirely, but partially diametrically opposed in certain areas. And you're trying to live together. That's a recipe for disaster.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I just don't see any other way around it. And one of those other statistics I saw, I can't remember, it was one of these South American countries or Central American countries, that they've lost 30% of their entire population of the entire country to migration. Now, I don't know what percentage of those people made it to the US because we're having multiple millions of people coming over illegally. But can you imagine a third of your entire country's population leaves and goes to America or some other place? Like, it's just like, I'm saying all this to point out this is a catastrophic problem that nobody's thinking out. And I cannot understand why it's not being done more carefully. I cannot understand why even liberal people don't understand why this might be a socially destabilizing problem. And Kamala Harris is key among these people, right? She was the one given the responsibility for the border, right, from Biden when they were first elected.
Which they're all denying.
I saw that.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
So she's the one who's responsible for what's happened to the U.S. so far, and the left is trying to put tremendous weight behind her to make her president so she can do it for 4 more years. And it's terrifying.
Yep.
I don't buy into any of this hype that I'm seeing. It all seems very manufactured to me. Everything I see is about how, it's like
the Kamala hype.
The Kamala hype. I can't tell you how many stories that I've seen where people have said something like this. I've got this curmudgeonly old, dad or grandpa who's been a Republican his whole life, and I can't believe he told me he's voting for Kamala Harris this time because,
I can tell you, and I don't know how much this tracks onto reality, but I know a person who that's the truth.
What?
Yeah.
And
well,
what's the
I should say I don't know how curmudgeonly and like right-wing conservative whatever they used to be, but I do know a person. I don't know them, but I know a person who knows them, who this person is voting for Kamala, and like I wouldn't have expected.
Was this person going to vote for Biden? Can you know?
I don't know.
See, that's the thing.
Yeah. I think that the limited information that I got is that this person just doesn't like Trump and doesn't want to vote for Trump, which is so fucking gay.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't fucking love Trump either, but I'm sure as fuck voting for. Who the fuck else am I going to vote for?
Certainly not Kamala. And I don't understand how anybody can justify voting for Kamala Harris, apart from those people that vote blue no matter who, those people, because they have rocks rolling around in their heads, and there's nothing you can do about them.
Well, she's a black Indian woman, Chris, so they have to vote for her. Black Indian woman, she's the trifecta,
and that's a qualification somehow, huh?
Yeah, somehow.
I don't know anything about Kamala Harris. She was very, very quiet.
You don't know anything about her?
Well, I'll tell you what I do know, and you can fill in the gaps from what you know. She was very quiet as vice president. I didn't hear much of her. Wasn't like she was giving speeches. She didn't seem significant in the slightest. She was never in the public eye. I thought she was hiding.
It's because people don't like her. She's like one of the least likable politicians that I've ever seen in my life. She ran in the primary against Joe Biden when, they were picking Joe Biden as the nominee for the last election. And she dropped out because she's unlikable. And Tulsi Gabbard completely fucked her up. This is about to die anyway.
Oh,
so.
that sucks.
Yeah. What was I gonna say? Oh yeah,
Tulsi Gabbard.
Tulsi just completely fucked her up, and after that happened, she had to drop out. But while she was still in, she like called Joe Biden a racist. Like was like after Joe Biden super hard, and then Joe Biden still picks her because she's a black woman, even though like
Yeah,
I don't know. But before she got to that, she was the senator of California. And before that, she was, I believe,
a DA. She was a DA.
yeah,
at
district
some point.
attorney.
Yeah. That's the only thing I know. I don't know. I just the criticisms that I've heard of her. The one that makes the most impact to me is her record as a district attorney, because, and again, I don't know any of the facts. I'm just telling you what I've heard many, many times, is that she put a shit ton of people away for nonviolent drug offenses. Those are people that someone with her pedigree should certainly not be, but she was so concerned about her record, right? Because that's what makes a DA is a politician.
Yeah.
And they're judged on their record of conviction. So she was willing to convict people and put them in jail. And I'm sure a disproportionate number of them were black people, right? We're talking about drug crimes in California, for Christ's sake. And she had no problem with that. So long as she could put a little win in her box.
And part of the reason that she did that, at least stated reason, is that it's like free labor. So, I mean, we're talking about slavery kind of.
Jesus Christ. Did she really say that?
Yep.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So she's,
that should be in campaign commercials, the negative kind of campaign commercials.
I'm sure it will be. I'm at this point, man, I'm like pretty sure that Donald Trump is going to win. Like, I don't even think things are so bad that I don't even think they're going to be able to, do what they did last time. Just, I don't want to get us canceled. Because apparently like YouTube is like cracking. If you start talking about that, they'll give you the boot.
Well, everybody knows what we're talking about. So I hope you're right about that. I think if they manufacture enough perception of enough support for her publicly, they will have no problems trying again. All they have to do is make it seem like everybody supports her, and then we expect the votes to come in for her. Yeah. So that's why I think the manufacturing support for her is it's over the top crazy right now.
I don't know if she's even going to be the nominee, although it does seem like she's going to be at this point, because a bunch of like power players in the Democrat establishment have like endorsed her at this point.
And she's raised like $122 million already.
How much is that?
I don't know.
Like George Soros, just a drop in the bucket. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. But I mean, just to go back to her past, you heard anything about how she came to power, how she like got the advantage and things like that?
I've seen photos of her with some black fella whom I don't know who he is. So you tell me, man.
Actually, I can't remember his position. Was he the mayor of San Francisco?
Oh, was he a politician? Okay.
Yeah, Willie Brown. Apparently she was, doing the old hawk to to get where she got. She climbed up the ladder on her back, if you know what I'm saying.
Do we know anything about how she did in college?
I don't know.
I wonder.
She seems dumb as a stump.
See, that's another thing. Is like, there's been those weird clips of her where she sounds like she's on Xanax, like she just like she's slurring her words and she sounds fucked up. But even when she's not, it's like she sounds like she sounds like she's trying to sound like Barack Obama and is doing a terrible job.
Yeah.
And then she giggles.
See, before this is dead, let's see if I can find.
What kind of power cord do you need?
That's all right. It'll only take a second. I don't even know if I'm going to be able to find it.
He's looking for a Kamala video.
Yeah, it's this video of her explaining the situation with Russia and Ukraine.
Oh, what is it? The one where she says, Russia's a big country.
Yeah.
Ukraine is a little country.
I can't find
it. What we have here is a big country imposing on a little country.
Yeah.
Isn't that bad?
Yeah, she's dumb. She's like fully retarded. But they're trotting her out,
I did hear one good piece of news that they won't permit a presidential candidate to choose a vice president from the same state.
Yeah.
So no Gavin Newsom.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see. From what I don't know how much this is true, but I've heard that they've like talked to people about being her vice presidential candidate and they're not interested.
That's
They
interesting.
like don't want to hitch themselves to that wagon.
Well, if you have high ambitions, if you have the highest ambitions, if you want to be president of the United States, becoming vice president is not necessarily going to help you, especially if it could.
But yeah,
but especially if the administration suffers and you see all that bad PR.
I would honestly say that that's the situation that Kamala's in, like right now.
Yeah,
they're spinning it to where they're trying to give her as much support as they can, but Joe Biden's term has been a disaster.
A disaster.
You know, so she hasn't.
It's
not doing her any favors.
If Joe Biden's presidential term doesn't go down in history with like Woodrow Wilson's, then or Hoover, right? Like would be. I mean, our economic situation isn't as bad as it was then. Maybe I don't know if that's I don't know if that's a fair statement, but just terrible. Just
everything is shit.
Shit.
Yep. Yeah, I don't know, man.
Now somebody, Ben Shapiro, he did a mini series on the Daily Wire called Scamala.
Okay.
I watched the first episode of it, but it tries to tell the story of her rise. So I haven't seen like much of the details yet, but I'm gonna have to get back to that and see what else I can learn. It's like a 6-part series of Ben Shapiro talking shit about Kamala Harris. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Good old Ben Shapiro. We haven't said anything bad about him this episode.
I don't mind Ben.
Yeah, I mean, Ben Shapiro says enough stuff that I agree with that it's a problem, you know, because he says a bunch of other stuff that I don't agree with at all.
Yeah.
Like really important stuff.
Don't you hate that? There's a guy who I've talked about on the podcast a lot. His name is Bernardo Kastrup.
Yeah.
Very, very smart guy. He's interested in lots of the same shit I'm interested in.
Big lib.
He is such a lib, and he is one of those maniacal, like crazy hates Trump, like fanatically. And every time I see him tweet on Twitter, on X, whatever you want to call it, it's always something. Nowadays, it's always something like that. It's so disappointing.
How can you be that smart and that stupid?
Great question.
It's weird, man.
I think that being intelligent could not be further removed from being aware. It's like, you know, I'm a pretty smart guy. I had a relatively easy time in school, but a lot of things have been hard lessons to learn, like real life lessons, the kind of stuff we talk about, like noticing how indoctrinated you've been, noticing that like this is pretty well accepted now, but 5 years ago, talking about the media being entirely corrupt is not something that happened, but it was true then, just like it's true now.
Oh yeah.
And nobody knew it. I didn't know it.
It's crazy how far back that's been the truth, you know?
Yeah.
A long time.
Joe Rogan talks about what happened with hemp and how when hemp was outlawed, the papers were used, the media was used by the guy who run the paper and also owned the paper mill. You know, he basically filled the media with stories about the dangers of hemp and marijuana so he could preserve his own. Like that's manipulating the media. I mean, through the media manipulating the people. That's propaganda. That's a corporation doing it and the government allowing it. That, you know, that I don't know when that was, but that was a long fucking time ago.
Yeah. I mean, I think it goes back way farther than that.
I'm sure it does.
But, you know, yeah, for sure. So how much more time do we got? Oh, we still got a little bit of time.
Yeah.
So we were talking about vice president stuff. And I'm just curious we haven't really talked about JD Vance since he's been he got the nod from Trump. So what do you think about that?
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up. So I started watching Hillbilly Elegy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I wanted to
get the audiobook.
Yeah.
It's better. Obviously.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't realize it was a book turned into a movie.
Yeah.
I haven't finished it yet. So but just seeing how he was brought up, it's already a pretty compelling story, you know. But like I said, I have a long stretch of it I have to watch yet, so I don't really know all the details. I don't know much about JD Vance. I know what you told me early on was that he was associated with Peter Thiel and the Facebook Mafia or whatever you were calling it. What was it? PayPal Mafia. But I don't really know. So you have to tell me. Fill me in, man.
I don't know. I mean, what do you want to know specifically?
Whatever. Well, what's your opinion of JD Vance?
I like JD Vance a lot. I think that he's going to be a good fit for Trump. I mean, you like Vivek a lot, right?
I love Vivek.
You know, they went to school together.
College?
Yeah, Yale.
No,
they both went to Yale together.
I didn't know.
So yeah, I think that they are, and Vivek is tied into that whole PayPal Mafia type thing too. So yeah, they're like very similar. They're on similar pages. So
did you hear that? I don't want to get off this topic of JD Vance, but it just popped in my head because Vivek is one of the people that is being supposed as having a potential cabinet seat with Trump's new administration, which I think is the right choice. Tulsi is also.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
I'm not interested. I would not have anything to do with Tulsi Gabbard.
Really? Yeah. I like Tulsi in some ways.
Yeah. I mean, what in her?
I mean, she's a patriot who served in the military during the Iraq conflict, which is noble. She was willing to go on Joe Rogan many times while she was still a candidate and talk for 3 hours openly. That's pretty cool. And she's not as lefty as most lefties.
She's pretty fucking lefty.
Yeah. I don't really know. I'm talking kind of out of my ass at the moment, but
I mean, her like position on military intervention is okay. You know, it's not even the best. Like she gets a lot of credit for that, but it's not great.
Yeah.
You know, she's not like Scott Horton or something like that. Although, I mean, that's like Scott Horton is like a libertarian kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a foreign policy expert with like a libertarian bent.
Yeah.
And there's like one of the things that I can agree with on libertarians still to some degree is like their foreign policy. You know, I don't think that we should be out there starting wars for absolutely no reason, but I'm also not like completely opposed to it either. Like if it makes sense, then I don't have a problem with it. If we can win and there's a reason for us to be there, I'm not completely opposed to it. But I don't know. My point is just that like, I just don't. I'm not that impressed with her.
Yeah,
I would not. If I was Donald Trump or if I was in Donald Trump's ear, I would not. Why? What do you benefit from putting her in a cabinet position? What is the benefit?
Well, I think there might be some optics.
Fuck optics.
Like a bipartisan cabinet.
Fuck that. No, dude. No olive branches for these fucking.
While we're talking about military policy, I want to ask you a specific question, just out of curiosity. I'm a non-interventionist. I'm a Ron Paul type of when it comes to military intervention. What if you had a situation where there was human rights abuses? This is one of these like things when they happen. It's like there's
like what if the Holocaust was going on?
What if the Holocaust was going on in the Philippines or something?
Not interested.
Okay. I'm just curious. Do you think we have a moral obligation?
No.
I'm sort of in that camp myself. I think that the people of the Philippines in that example have a moral obligation. Yeah.
I'll pray for you, thoughts and prayers. Now, if I'll say this, if there's something that we can get out of it, if we can benefit from it, I'm open to it. If there is some way in which we will come out better, I'm fine with it. Like the shit that was going on in Haiti, dude, let's take Haiti. Let's make, how easily do you think we could clear that situation up? You put somebody like Eric Prince in charge of like a fairly small military force, they could sweep Haiti out in no fucking time, dude.
Oh yeah.
Then we've got another like a tourist attraction where we're just like farming money,
Yeah.
I'm fine with that. I have no problem with that.
Well, I mean, the entire Caribbean would be easy pickings for us, for the U.S. clearly, but yeah, I don't know, man.
I'm for. I'm pretty much for that at this point. I think we should do it.
Can you imagine trying to install, like even in Puerto Rico, which is a Commonwealth of the United States? I imagine, and maybe I'm wrong. I could be wrong. I imagine that it's super corrupt because every banana republic is super corrupt. Every place I've ever been in the Caribbean, everybody, you need to pay everybody. You have to pay everybody all the time.
Yeah.
And I've heard worse things about Mexico and places like that. It's like you get pulled over, you're expected to bribe the cops. If you don't bribe them, guess what? You're in trouble, man.
You're going to a Mexican
right?
jail.
You're going to a Mexican prison. Can you imagine taking over a country like that? I don't care how small it is. Taking over a country like that and trying to rule it. Like how do you push back against the momentum of a history of just
you get the very recent history book about Nayib Bukele, and you follow that model. Problem solved.
Problem solved. Okay, then.
Serious, like honestly, like he's killing it down there. And did you see the video? So Nayib Bukele came to power in El Salvador, cleaned up the streets. Like it was like literally one of the most violent places on earth, and now it's one of the safest places on earth.
It's crazy.
Huge turnaround. Okay. So safe and so prosperous at this point that like I think Google just opened like a headquarters there or something.
Can
like
Bukele run for mayor of New York?
I hope so. I would be fine with it.
Or Chicago.
But then after that happens, you know, he starts doing all kinds of things. Like he incorporated Bitcoin and he made it like some official in some capacity.
Yeah.
And he's got like a reserve of Bitcoin, like a federal reserve of Bitcoin, which Trump actually just recently talked about doing too. But then one of the things he did was he got all of the houses of Congress or whatever they do down there. And basically said, I called all of you here because I'm having my attorney general look into all of you. And if there's any corruption, we're getting rid of you.
That's so awesome.
Yeah. So that's what you do. Or, you know, if we go, like, let's say we do that in Haiti and it's a banana republic, you just get rid of all of them and you staff it with people that you can trust, which saying that kind of reminds me of where I was going with talking about JD Vance and Vivek and Trump.
Yeah.
Like one of the things that they talk about is gutting the administrative state.
Yes.
Just getting rid of it.
Yes.
So I'm honest. I'll be honest with you. I'm not 100% sold that Trump is going to be great because he was pretty good, you know, in comparison to what we've been dealing with. He was pretty good his first term, but not great. So if he gets in and they start doing things, so if JD Vance and Vivek and these people are a big influence on him and they actually start doing that kind of stuff, I think things are going to go well.
That would be tremendous.
I'm honestly not. I know that they can't come out and say this kind of thing, but honestly, I kind of hope that they like. I'm hoping for like some Franco shit. You know what I'm saying? Break the rules. I don't fucking care, man. Fix the problem.
Yeah.
Fix the problems. And if they fix the problems, the people who are bitching about breaking the rules are going to stop bitching about breaking the rules. That's what happened with Bukele. You know, he went down there and he's like, we're suspending the Constitution. And now everyone's fucking happy to live there. You know, I'm for it. I'm like, I think that that's what we need to do.
I think that works fine if the Bukele or the Trump, if that person is a noble person, you know?
Yeah, but if we don't do that, they're going to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, they're
So we need to do it.
Oh, boy.
What is the argument against that? Like, you can sit around with your thumb in your ass and not do it, and they're going to put you on a boxcar.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess we have to be clear about what needs to be done. We got to be specific and talk about it. Like I saw this video.
It's not really up for you to decide. It's for the person who comes into power. It's for them to decide. And you just have to hope that they're, you know, you don't like, you can fuck around and let it be Kamala if you want.
No, I'm not doing that. I saw this video in Russia of a whole bunch of migrants who came into the country illegally being rounded up and being taken. The police took them to remove them from the country.
Mm-hmm.
And it's nice to see a country that doesn't fuck around, that doesn't allow the sovereignty of their borders and their people to be diluted and watered down and put at risk by people coming in illegally. So I think that's one thing that Trump has said that, and I'm sure I could easily be criticized for this, and Trump as well. But I agree that if he comes in to power and makes a giant show of effort to remove all these illegals that have been coming in, that is, if he did nothing else, that would be a tremendous victory for law and order. And that's very important. We're losing law and order. We're losing it step by step. I don't think any of the social or economic arguments matter. I think it's a matter of the rule of law. These people have shown no respect to this country, its citizens, or its laws, and they're just coming here because for selfish reasons, so that they can have a better life.
Yep.
And listen, that's not a bad thing to want, but it is selfish, and you are breaking the law. And the fact that these people think the rules don't apply to them, it's so shameful, and it can't be. Trying to think of how Immanuel Kant worded Jesus's golden rule, because he basically reworded it. He said that
the hubris.
Yeah, the hubris. He said that that an act, that the morality of an action should be based on the outcome of making it a universal law. So it's like, if you say it's okay for someone to come over illegally, what you're saying is everyone should be able to come and go, illegally across any border boundary, wherever. That's what you want to be the law of the land. If you say it's okay for one person, you're saying that you want that to be a universal law, and that's how you judge whether something should be moral or not. If you say to yourself, you can justify why somebody who's a refugee, should the law shouldn't apply to him or her in this moment. We're going to make an exception for you. The moment you do that, you have to say, if I do that, if that now becomes a universal law, what are the outcomes going to be? Is that going to be something that's good for our country? Is that going to be good for me personally? If everybody who wants to come can come, the answer is clearly no. And so it's called a categorical imperative. That's what it calls it. Because the answer is no, then it's not okay even for the one exception. Mm-hmm. So I think that argument to me is a powerful one when it comes to this migrant issue. And again, I could talk more about the social or economic consequences, and there's lots of reasons why that might be seen as harmful. I don't think we need that. It's all about law and order. It's all that's enough. That's enough. You know?
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Francisco Franco 2024. That's what we need, baby. Yeah, I what would you do if Trump gets elected and like the first thing he does is we're suspending the Constitution? How would you feel about that?
I would reserve judgment
based on
because
what's done.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I guess what the question is if there's a national emergency that needs to be addressed in a very unique way.
Which I would say there is.
I would say the argument could be made. Is it okay to suspend the Constitution in those situations? I don't know how to answer that question. I don't think I can imagine there's instances where I would agree that it should be suspended. Is that a terrible risk? Yes.
Yeah.
So I don't know, man. I got mixed feelings about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think back to the Spanish Civil War and Franco. Was it a terrible risk? I guess so, but Franco also held that country together, and had amazing approval ratings. People loved Franco. And then as soon as he, when he died, it was like he reinstituted the monarchy. He was a military dictator, but they never, the Republicans in the Civil War wanted to get rid of the monarchy altogether. The monarch fled to like Greece or something like that. And then he eventually like reestablished the monarchy with like the son of the king that was there. But I mean, as soon as he died, they just basically started liberalizing, and it's been shit.
Do you think that the Cultural Revolution of China, that you can make an analogy there to say that Mao suspended the rights of the people so that he could do this thing that he thought was going to be in the best interest of the nation, the Cultural Revolution? Because that's the risk I'm talking about. It's the risk that millions of people will die and a dictator regime will be installed. You know what I mean? That's terrifying, man.
Yeah.
I don't think Trump is that type of a person.
Does it make any difference to you who the people are who are dying?
I'm sure it does. Yeah. I mean, I'm just trying to be honest. People who I know and love are more important to me than people I don't. So I think it matters.
That for sure, without question. But like, in my mind, I'm not. Well, we're like really like talking about things that we could get in trouble for here. If you would be willing to, let's just say, put me in prison for a long time. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If you would be willing to do that to me, I don't have that much sympathy for you,
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of these people are willing to do it to us, whatever that nebulous it is that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of people. They took a shot at Trump.
They sure did. To me, that is symbolic of the entire left.
I'm not defending those people.
No.
I have no interest in defending those people.
No.
And like, if we get to a point where it's time to like start fixing the problems and they're standing in the way of fixing the problems, I'm not going to hem and haw. I'm not going to make excuses for them. Get out of the fucking way.
Yeah.
Or get run over, that's how I feel about it.
Yeah. Man, it's very difficult talking to you about politics sometimes, Kyle.
Why is that?
As I find myself not being able to disagree with you about uncomfortable things.
I feel like it's because of the nature of reality, and the fact that you've got, and this is like my whole problem with libertarianism. It's like you've got these ideals that you hold very dear, and they make sense to you on like in a logical way. But if you live by those, you're going to die, and you're going to ruin your culture, and you're going to cause the world that you live in now and that your daughters have to live in the future is going to be a fucking nightmare. And you're going to hand it over to the people who are going to do that because of your stupid principles.
Yeah. Yeah.
So be idealistic and get fucked, or you can still be idealistic, you just have to change your ideals a little bit. You have to adopt the right ideals.
Yeah. Yeah. The thing about communism specifically that I find to be strange is that it never seems to be tried on a small scale to see if it works before they ramp it up to a large scale. They continuously make the argument that that's doomed to fail, that you can't test it out. You have to go 100% full bore. Everybody has to do it, and you have to be all in.
Do you ever wonder about like, let's think of like some kind of absolute monarchy, and a lot of those historically had like long runs of being very successful. So like, how much of a difference is there between like Soviet communism and like, I mean, obviously that didn't work well, but like some of these, if you've got an absolute monarchy and you've got a person who is completely in control, how much difference is there between that? Like, obviously,
and
one of them just did it better.
Between a monarch and a dictator?
Well, no, I don't think there's much of a difference in those,
No.
But I'm talking about a communist dictator, like, or even just like a massive like you said, why don't they start small?
Yeah.
But like these absolute monarchies that had control over everything, they weren't small, and they did well,
Well, yes, but I think that the feudal system developed. It started small, and it became the monarchies became. It's like the difference between like the types of kings that were warring in Macbeth, and then like the monarchies that fought in the American Revolution. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
there's a difference between you have like a village and you have a lord, and you can figure out how to manage that well, and then you grow it and grow it and grow it until you have a what we would call a classical monarchy. So it is tried on a small scale to see if it works before it's able to grow like that.
Yeah, but that's like kind of to my point that it being like dogmatically opposed to it, to me, doesn't make sense,
Opposed to what?
like central control, I have less of a problem with it than I've ever had in my life.
Yeah, I know. I mean, there's definitely a place for that. There's a place for central control. Every system has that,
Yeah.
I mean, you could argue that maybe like a true democracy doesn't, but that hasn't existed since Athens.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I think that to have like this ideal kind of libertarian society that the founders of this country like wanted and created. I mean, I think it was John Adams said something that like to the effect of this system will never work without a moral people, and we're not a moral people. So
yeah.
I think we,
Boy,
like I said, Franco 2024.
System will never work unless we have a moral people. Boy, that is the most damning sentence.
Yep. Not good. Because we ain't.
Jesus. Well, we're at time, you guys.
Yes, indeed.
So we will
flies by.
Do the likes and subscribes, all the things that you're obligated now to do since you've heard me ask nicely.
Tell us in the comments if you're down for a dictator. Are you pro dictator or anti dictator?
Let's hear it. I'm interested. Oh, I never got around to telling you about the latest episode of the Onion Unlimited podcast. So I'll just really quickly tell you, I'm interested to listen to it, but I'm like obviously very skeptical. Daniel's talking to a person who claims to be like possessed by this spirit called, it's like he's got like a name, and it's like a sort of a channeling situation. I don't know, but I'm completely baffled and interested to know what in the fuck that is going to be all about. So anyway, I could have said more about it, but I haven't watched it yet. So
talk about it next time.
That's the kind of thing that I mean when I say the type of people that think along the lines I do are the kind of people that would be open to such an idea. And I still resist it, man. It just seems a little bit too out there for me. Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
And with that, I'll cue the music.
Adios.